The legendary manga One Piece has captured the hearts of millions of people across the world for the past 25 years, not only for its characters, their superpowers, and their clashes against one another, but also for its surprisingly intricate and engaging world building. With every new chapter, dozens of YouTube videos are released, most of them being very bad, that question and theorize about every tiny detail. Recently, one of the craziest shakeups to the manga happened, with Luffy being revealed not as the owner of the Gomu Gomu no Mi as we all thought, but the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, a mythical zone-type fruit that lets Luffy turn into Bugs Bunny. Now this was a crazy revelation, but I knew it was coming. I knew that this was going to happen from the very beginning, because the Skypiea arc told us this would happen. Let me explain. 20 years ago, One Piece began the Skypiea arc, where the Straw Hat Pirates sail into the sky to Skypiea Island, discovering the place is in danger of being destroyed by its god, Enel. A lot of very interesting symbolism is brought up here that foreshadows where the series will go from now on. First of all, the central conflict between Luffy and Enel, men of rubber and lightning respectively, poses Luffy as Enel's natural enemy, the enemy of God. Later in the series, the idea of the man who will bring the dawn is brought up, and this all seems to be leading to the eventual conflict between Luffy and the world government, bringing the dawn by destroying the government. All this world building has its origin right here in Skypiea. Another interesting detail is during the party at the end of the arc, we see Luffy silhouetted against the fire, which is similar to the usually given visage of the sun god Nika, who is introduced far later, and this is masterfully paid off when the Nika fruit is revealed. So we can identify the clear and obvious roots that Skypiea represents for the rest of the series, but there is so much more under the surface. For example, playing into the god themes, a large amount of names in Skypiea reference religion in some way or another. The first instance of observation haki is seen in this arc, where it is called mantra by its users, with mantra being a word or sound used in Buddhism and Hinduism to aid meditation. The references to Buddhism specifically don't end there, as characters such as Satori, Gedatsu, and Shura are all levels of reincarnation in Buddhism. Another interesting thing is that in the cover stories, Enel learns that the Sky People came from the moon. This could be a loose connection to the Anunnaki, a group of gods once worshipped by ancient Mesopotamians. In some theories, it is believed that they were aliens who came to Earth and began mining gold, creating humans as a slave race, but were eventually forced to leave for a time when Antarctic glaciers melted, causing a great flood that destroyed their presence on the planet. It is very interesting to note that Enlil, an Anunnaki associated with the wind, earth, and storms, sounds very similar to Enel. If the Skypieans are supposed to be the Anunnaki, it is only fair to assume that Skypiea holds serious significance, which I believe to be correlated to the legends of Agartha and of Yakub. Yakub, of course, was a real black scientist who lived 6,600 years ago and created white people by practicing selective breeding on an isolated island. Remind you of anything? And do keep in mind, since this obviously means Enel is Yakub, this only leaves Agartha to explain. As anyone could tell you, Agartha is a legendary kingdom in the center of the earth, which is of course hollow, and while it may seem confusing that Skypiea, which is in the air, could be Agartha, the solution is quite simple, being that it just went up. Agartha is also connected to another ancient myth, that of the Hyperboreans, a race of people who inhabited a paradise on Earth, much like the Shandeans before the paradise was ripped away from them. And what did those Shandeans worship? A giant snake, sort of similar to Jormungandr, an enormous snake that encircles the Earth and will signify the coming of Ragnarok when it releases its tail from its mouth. The snake is actually an enemy of Thor, who we all know is the god of thunder, much like how Enel is a god of thunder and how he is the enemy of all Skypiea, the snake included. There's one interesting myth about Thor and Jormungandr that relates to this quite heavily. Once, Thor encountered a giant king named Utgarda Loki, who isn't actually that Loki, it's a different Loki, and his name means Loki of the Outlands to distinguish him from that Loki. Though he is called Skyrim? Huh? The third iteration of the Eldmeri Dominion we see in the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, is a group ruled by the Thalmor, xenophobic high elves who believe they are above all other races. They came into power during the Oblivion Crisis, when the Altmer of Somerset were almost totally eradicated by Daedra, until the armies of Mehrunes Dagon completely vanished. Although it was Martin Septim who was actually responsible for this, the Thalmor, who at the time were seen as a pathetic and weak group in Altmer society, stole the credit for ending the crisis and shot up pretty much immediately into becoming the Altmer ruling class. Then they launched a war against the Empire, taking over Valenwood and eventually Elsewhere, before strong-arming the Empire into signing the White Gold Concordat. The fact that they are so radically different from the First Aldmeri Dominion is a subject of much debate. The First Dominion was an allied force of the Altmer, Bosmer, and Khajiit to retake Tamriel and feared that the younger races were bringing it to ruin. The Khajiit had an interesting role in this alliance. In lore, it is explained that Khajiits have a ritual to appoint a new main, the leader of the Khajiits, where the successor is taken on a dangerous quest to go to the moon and earn the right to be the main. So, we can conclude from this that many years ago, Khajiit found a way to the moon and formed colonies, until eventually coming back down into the sky, where they formed Skypiea, inspiring legends about the Anunnaki, Agartha, and the Hyperboreans. The stuff about Yakub is real though.